Welcome to Relationships and Realizations. Welcome back, everybody. So this week, we are going to do something a little bit different. This week, you get me and only me. So I decided to kind of take a step back in time and talk a little bit about myself and how I grew up, and specifically growing up in the gay community. I myself am heterosexual. I identify as a heterosexual female, but my mom identified as a lesbian. And, growing up, I never saw anything different. There was nothing different about her, to me anyways. There was never a, why do I have two mommies? She had commented, as I got older, that I had asked. I don't remember ever asking, but, I'm sure that in childish, questioning, I'm sure it came up, where's my dad? Or why don't I have a dad? But I never felt that lacking. There are other aspects of our relationship that was lacking, but that really didn't have anything to do with her preference, her sexual preference, but my mom was a very complicated person, to say the least. We had a very complicated relationship, and that was due largely in part because I felt that she really didn't know how to be a mom. And I don't know if it was that she didn't know how, that she didn't want to, or she just had other priorities in her life. And, not to go too deep into mine and her relationship, that'll be another podcast episode. That's an episode all in itself. But suffice to say that it was very difficult. Our relationship was very difficult. And there were many times that I was the mom and she was the daughter. I was always more mature than my age, and I felt that I had to be because my mom wasn't being a mom. So that's really, the crux of our relationship, so to speak. But getting back on track. Just to give you that little background, so that way you can kind of understand as I move forward through, this explanation, you can kind of understand, you can kind of gauge why, things were the way that they were, I suppose. But anyhow, like I said, my mom, she identified as a lesbian woman, and my entire life, that's how it was. There was never a man in her life that I can ever recall. And there was nothing wrong with that to me at all. And all of the people that my mom befriended while I was young, while I was a child, were some of the most wonderful people that I still fortunately have in my life, and that I'm still able to talk to. And, thank goodness for social media, because I still talk to them. And, it was good. Life was good. When I was a child, we would go to Balboa Park. There was a small park, and I think it was called Queen Circle in Balboa Park. And we would go on Sundays and have a park, and all her friends would bring their blankets out, and we would play Frisbee and, just have a good time. And it was fun. And things were like every other family that you can possibly imagine and their friends. And my mom was working a regular job, and, everything was normal, I guess, quote unquote normal. And then I don't know really what happened or what kind of changed, but my mom started to become very involved in the community, and she started to become very involved in making a difference. And I don't know if it was any one thing in particular, if it was a friend that got her involved in different organizations, or if she just had, the internal desire to want to make a difference or to want to make a change. But she started to get heavily involved in a lot of organizations within the community that were helping to provide services for really underserved communities, sub-communities within the communities, if that makes any sense. For example, within the gay community, obviously there are Hispanics in the gay community, there are Blacks in the gay community, there are whites, et cetera, et cetera. So my mom really got involved in the Latin uh, part of helping the community. And not to say that she didn't help everybody, but there were organizations that were geared towards helping to bring awareness of, for example, safe sex and how to practice safe sex. And at that time, just to kind of, I guess, reveal my age a little, I think I've mentioned it before, but, this was in the 80s. And if you know anything about anything in the community, the HIV/AIDS epidemic was a serious crisis at that time. So my mom was heavily involved in the Latin outreach, and she just got really invested in making a difference. And there were things that I remember from when I was younger, and I was very close with my grandmother, and for a large part of my life until my grandmother passed, when I was 12 or 13, for the most part, my grandmother raised me, and it was due in part to the difficult relationship that I had spoke of earlier, but it also became more and more prevalent as my mom got more and more involved in community outreach. And at the height of the epidemic, one of the things that I'll never ever forget, there were several organizations within the gay community here in San Diego that would take supplies across the border. Unfortunately, in Tijuana and other cities along the border, the coroners wouldn't provide the proper things to bury the individuals that were dying from complications of HIV and AIDS. So the organizations here in San Diego, raised funds and purchased body bags. That's something that we don't think of. And especially in today's day and age, it's not something that you even, unless you were involved in it or you are part of it, that you really understand the depth of the situation and how dire the situation was at that time. And, as a child, these things were explained to me, and it wasn't weird and it wasn't strange. It was sad to me. And, I guess that kind of helped with being mature for my age, is that these concepts were being taught to me and told to me at such a young age, but they were all things that I understood. And these were things that my mom and the organizations that she was a part of were doing at that time. And, it seemed that she just got more and more involved, and it seemed like every evening there was an event to go to, or there was, a fundraiser to have, and as a side note, my mom was also a DJ. So of course, a DJ is always needed at every event. So if she wasn't there providing music for whatever fundraiser it was, she was there to show support for the fundraiser, or she was there to, just be a part of whatever was going on. And my mom was, she had a lot of demons, and there were things that she had told me that had happened to her in her life. And, she had told me that her stepfather had molested her when she was younger. And fortunately or unfortunately, he passed away while she was still young. And she always felt guilty because she felt that she had wished death on him and he died. So she always felt in her child mind, she had always felt that she had caused it. So, with the victim, unfortunately, with the victim mentality, it was just further victimizing her, I guess, as the years went on. But my mom didn't always tell the truth. So when she had told me that, I really didn't know whether or not to believe her. But as I got older and just seeing what I saw, and from what I know from, studying psychology and things like that, it really does fit in with her having have been molested as a child, and and her fervor, I suppose, to try and make a difference and to try and focus on everybody else except herself. And she really drove herself to the point of exhaustion, constantly. And unfortunately, also to the sacrifice of mine and her relationship as well. Um, she was trying to change the world and she was trying to make the world a better place. And she wasn't taking the time to look in the mirror. And she wasn't taking the time to fix all of the things that were broken inside of herself. And the way that she dealt with it was that she drank. And unfortunately, when you're a DJ and you're at parties and you want to be the life of the party because it takes your mind off of everything else that you're dealing with or everything else that maybe starts popping up or starts creeping up in your mind, alcohol to you solves that problem. Obviously, as rational adults, we know that that's not really the case because your problems will be there after you get sober. Your problems will be there after you're done with, that hangover that you're dealing with. So, unfortunately, as time went on, she began to drink more and more heavy. And it seemed as though there was a shift in the friendships and there was a shift in what she was putting her time and effort into in the community. I don't really know the politics that were involved in the community. Um, Believe me, there are quite a few politics in the gay community, and there are powerful people with a lot of money in the community that carry a big weight. I really don't know how else to put it. I guess it's just like regular politics. And I don't know if my mom got on the bad side of any of these individuals or if it was just her drinking was getting out of control and people didn't want to be around her. Honestly, I really don't know. At this time I was still on active duty. I was deployed. There was a lot of other things. I wasn't living here in San Diego. I was stationed elsewhere. And so there were a lot of things that I wasn't seeing. And at that time, my mom and I really weren't communicating very much because I didn't want to be around her because of her drinking. And she wouldn't listen to me. I was the bad guy because I didn't let her drink when I was around. But that is a whole other podcast episode also. But back to what I was talking about earlier. Being a part of the community and growing up in the community was a really amazing place. And, I can remember as a young child, not too young, but maybe 10 or 11. And, all of my aunts were drag queens and they were awesome. And, most of my gowns that I wore to special events, to galas for the Imperial Court or anything like that, were all handmade by these wonderful women. And unfortunately, a lot of them aren't with us anymore because they unfortunately died from complications of HIV and AIDS. But they were some of the most generous, wonderful people that I will never, ever forget. And I still have those gowns. There's no way I could fit into them. I probably couldn't even get one leg into any of those gowns now. But, those were things that I remember. And I remember going to drag shows and watching the queens get dressed and, knowing what tucking meant. By the time I was 12, I knew what that meant. And, other people, other friends of mine that were not in the gay community or part of the gay community had very different childhood experiences. And, it's just very interesting to me how much of a different dynamic that brings, and how many different people and the different views that you receive, when you're a part of something that you may not be. For example, like I said, I identify as a heterosexual female, but I was still very much a part of the community. And I was their niece, or I was their little sister. I was, there to watch everything and to be a part of everything. And being in the parade, and my mom being recognized. And there was one year she was, quite a few years she was recognized in the Pride Parade, and it was just amazing. And the community here in San Diego has grown exponentially, and at the risk of sounding super old and saying I remember when, but I do. I remember when the Pride Parade was not quite as large as it is now, but it was amazing. It was amazing then, and it's amazing now. But people don't realize how much of a melting pot we are here in San Diego, and how amazing it is here in San Diego. And there are other cities that are very similar, but growing up, I never saw anything different about anybody. And that was one of the most wonderful things I think about living here and growing up here. But, like I was saying earlier, my mom was very involved, and on almost every committee you could think of, and fundraisers, and the Imperial Court, and, Gay and Lesbian Latinos con Orgullo, and all of these other organizations that she was putting her time and effort in to help other people. But unfortunately, like I said, she wasn't doing anything to help herself. And as time went on, those demons really came to the forefront of everything that she was doing. And unfortunately, my mom passed from cirrhosis of the liver, which, if you're not familiar with that, basically it's being an alcoholic. So she's not here for me to ask any of these questions. She's not here for me to try and help her through her issues or anything like that. And it's been almost 10 years now. So I lost my mom at a fairly, I consider a young age. I was about 30 when my mom passed, and she hadn't even turned 50. So the downhill spiral happened pretty quickly, I think. Hindsight, of course, is always 2020. And I could say that I should have stepped in a lot sooner than I did and not have been hard-headed. But you never know, unfortunately, at the time. And, like I explained at the beginning, our dynamic was very different and very frustrating. And if I know anything about my mom, I know that she wouldn't have listened anyways. I could have locked her in the house and she still would have figured out a way. And for those of you that understand alcoholism, you know that they will always find a way, unfortunately. And if they want to change, they have to do it themselves. But I think the biggest takeaway that I have is that you can want to help to change the world. You can want to make a huge difference and a huge impact in the community, in any community, whatever community that you are a part of or that you want to help. But you really have to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. And you can't expect to help other people if you can't help yourself. And if you can't look at yourself in the mirror, then you probably should start there before you start trying to help everybody else, because there are people that depend on you. There are people that love you. There are people that don't want to see you fail. And if you try and pretend as though those things don't exist, you will eventually fail. And it is a very sad reality, but it's the truth. So, not to continue to be a Debbie Downer, when I initially wanted to do this episode of the podcast, I was thinking of all of the things about my childhood that I grew up and how I grew up and all of the different influences that I had in my life. And there are so many, growing up in the LGBTQ community is only one really small aspect of who I am and how I grew up and all of the things that made me who I am. It's one of the things that I absolutely embrace. Like I said, knowing all of the wonderful people and getting to meet all of the colorful personalities and the crazy personalities and the loud personalities, that I did along the way that I'm still friends with are some of the most amazing people. And you should always try and embrace all of the things in your past, whether you are happy about them, whether you are not so happy, you're upset about them. They're all things that make you who you are. And like I said, I choose to embrace those things. I have bad memories as well, but it is what it is. And all of the things throughout my life have made me who I am. And I like who I am. And if there are things that I don't like, then I try and change it. And if not, then I just keep it moving. But I don't have an issue looking at myself in the mirror. And I know just from being in my mom's sphere that if it ever got to that point where I felt that I was putting more of my effort into everybody else and into myself, then I would definitely take a hard stop and look at myself because unlike my mom, I know that there are people that love me and I definitely need to take care of myself. And that's probably the biggest thing that I'm going to leave you with is take care of yourself and make sure that you are not trying to take on the world. You are one person, and I'm sure you are an amazing person, but you also need to take a break. So keep that in mind. So that is this week's episode, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. Hopefully, it made you smile, it made you laugh, and also brought you a little bit of clarity. But if you would like to laugh, you can check out any of our videos. You can check them out from our website, rr.com, and you'll find our YouTube channel, you'll find our Facebook, our Instagram, all that wonderful stuff. Again, on our website, rr.com. If you thought this podcast was a little downer and you need to pick me up, go check out our website. We've got a lot of funny videos there. But until next week, everybody, talk to you later.